Welcome back to the Reuters Events Future of Insurance Year 2021 live stream. Coming up next, we've got a live panel discussion around how insurers can bring action and credibility to decarbonisation. For that, I will hand straight over to the moderator, James Mayer, Sustainable Insurance Leader at EY. Over to you, James.
Thank you indeed, Alex. So thank you, Alex, and welcome delegates and panelists to this session, where, as I say, we will engage on the role of insurance in assisting us to decarbonise society and mitigate the adverse outcomes of climate change. My name is James Maher. I'm a partner with EY based in Ireland, where I run the insurance practice. And as mentioned by Alex, I have responsibility for sustainable insurance within the EMEA region. So in this session, we will look to touch on how insurance has a vital role to play in enabling society to step into the uncertainty of transition and to step into the challenge of adaptation, not least through the provision of insurance to those impacted. The issues we are responding to are many decades in the making and will be many decades in the resolution, but we all have just 30 minutes here today. And in those 30 minutes, I'm going to look to elicit some meaningful insights from what is a very clearly leadership panel of participants. When I look to Nina and Katja from Swiss Re and Zurich, we can see the leadership is not just leadership in the marketplace through their organizations, but at a sort of fundamental level through their founding membership of United Nations Net Insurance Underwriting Alliance, which had its formal launch at COP26 yesterday. And then we look to the leadership of Ben Wilson and ABI through bringing industry together to climate change. And Bronwyn, who's probably been in this game longer than all of us and has been foundational in bringing insurance along on what is quite an arduous journey. So without further ado, I'm hoping the panel will not be a panel of blah, blah, blah. I'm hoping it will be a panel where we discuss what have we done, what are we currently doing, and what do we all need to do together. Hopefully at the end of the meeting, we'll have about 5 minutes for some questions from delegates. But again, that'll be dependent on how we get along as a group together. But I'm sure we're all going to get on well, panelists. Nina, I'm going to sort of start with you. So Nina, as I say, you are Chief Risk Officer at Swiss Re Corporate Solutions. And the question I do want to raise with you is, what has been the impact of creating a net zero policy on Swiss Re's approach to support the transition to a low carbon economy? And maybe not just talk about it today, maybe talk about the journey that Swiss Re's been on, because as I say, it's not an overnight game. So please, could you talk to us a little bit about the impact of your net zero policy? And also maybe a little bit on the journey to where we are today. So Nina, over to you.
Thank you, James. More than happy to do that. And I would also like to follow your invitation. That's not blah, blah, blah. So interrupt me if you think there is any blah, blah, and you wanna get concrete or deeper. Where shall I start? Well, I guess for us, and that's maybe something really particular, if we also compare to other insurance companies, as a global reinsurance company, I guess the topic really came prominently up already decades ago. And when I say decades ago, it was in 79, sorry, when we had our first related publication, which was around ecology and environmental protection. And why I'm saying that, I think we have a very natural interest in this whole topic as a global reinsurer, that we pool risks that are being influenced by climate change, full stop. And I'm saying that because that has certainly helped for us to get on this journey, maybe earlier than others, and also maybe being one of the reasons why I think we are one of the leading global insurance and reinsurance companies on that topic. And now when you ask me about what has been the impact of creating it, right? I think what was really, I mean, there are a lot of pledges and a lot of commitments out there, but really the turning point was the 2015 Paris pledge that we also agreed to. And I guess the turning point, because the net zero concept that we currently talk about, that's a logical consequence, or if I want to say it in other words, almost a translation of the Paris pledge, which in its sense brings a way more holistic view on the whole kind of transition and the whole CO2 topic. And it also moves a little bit from adaptation to mitigation, where reduction and removal has become a center part of it. And I think I would also describe it, look, on the operation side, which is also maybe an easier one for insurance companies to really tackle CO2. It then really moved into investment, and with net zero, I would say the underwriting side has been has become really a full part into that. And I think it's no longer just simply about exclusions, which I think we had that approach for quite some years. I mean, it was in 2009 when we introduced a sensitive business risk framework, which has a lot of exclusions of stuff we don't want to do. But I think net zero is really moving beyond this exclusion. And it's really moving also towards more a view where it's also about inclusion and it's about enhancement. And I think this more holistic understanding and approach to it, that's for me, one of the things that has really changed. Also in the company, what we have done in 2019, we launched our group-wide sustainability strategy. And I'm mentioning that before because sustainability has always been a core element for us as Swiss Re. But what really changed is in 2019, we also connected the different parts and elements of what we do around sustainability into one overarching strategy, where also for us, this acknowledgement and this conviction, for us, it makes business sense, became a core part of it. And I think that really kind of also, how should I say, was a driving force and is still a driving force across the company of conviction, this strong commitment that we have. And those have been essential parts to me, and I would say. And then the other thing is also that I would observe around this net zero and what has changed is that no longer we just look for partnerships within the insurance industry, but it's at least as important that also beyond the insurance industry, we build these partnerships to tackle the net zero challenge together. And the WEF CEO Climate Leader Alliance is one of those examples where you clearly see that insurance CEOs are willing and do step beyond the insurance industry, which I think is a very critical part of the net zero journey we're on. I'll stop here, James.
Yeah, no, thank you indeed. And I think we will come back to that conversation about we're all in this together later on, because it is we're all in this, together. I think the bit for me is very much around sort of the conviction statement, or the sort of the clarity of purpose conversation, and to again bring it from the blah 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 bit. So bear with me a second here. I was going to say, Katja, I'm going to throw you the hard ball now, and we are going to come back with this, which is, but having the commitment is one thing. But what does the program look like in terms of, is there a playbook or a set of steps that you would step into to say that underpinning that commitment, this is what the program looks like? Because I really want the delegates to learn from your leadership, because you've been on this journey. So we're going to come back to you, Nina, on underwriting. I don't want to hold your feet to the fire on underwriting decisions, moving beyond exclusion to engagement. But if we sort of bring in Katja first, and we'll have that conversation just around, talk me through the playbook, as they say, in terms of how do you go from commitment to action?
Okay. Thank you, James. And also thank you for inviting us. And as you mentioned, kind of like mentioning our leadership. I mean, first of all, I should say we, as the audience will know, we are currently the #1 in the Dow Jones Sustainability Index for insurers. And if I read the science right, and definitely for me, there is no intention to leave that position to anyone else anytime soon. So, I mean, there is a very, very strong commitment that is palpable all through the entire organization. And this will last. So how did we get there? How do we progress? I think there will not be the one and single playbook, because the industry participants are too diverse. They start from too diverse starting points. They have different portfolios. Reinsurance is different from primary insurance, life different from P&C, and so on and so on. But I think there are a couple of common themes that I would want to point out. One is, again, what I would say, start somewhere and go step by step. Yeah, just taking that first step and taking that second step after the first step is probably more important than thinking about on day one where you will be in 10 years. Yeah? These steps, we've seen again and again, there must be concrete, there must be tangible, there should be visible, there should be measurable. Yeah? Because then you make it tangible both for the customers and for the own employees that something is shifting, yeah, and that something has teeth. Communication around this is important, very closely linked to what I just said about step by step. And last but not least, I would also point out role modeling. Yeah, if we do something, we're not going to ask only our customers to do it; we do it ourselves. Yeah? And if we require something in operations that might affect our employees, it is not only for the employees; it's for the senior executives as well. I think that this is a not to be underestimated aspect here. Well, as the current focus in this playbook, I mean, Nina already kind of mentioned something on underwriting and on investments, operations. I would add one item where I think primary insurers can do a lot, which is probably not as far advanced industry-wide as it should be, and that is actually the claims space. Yeah? I mean, we can pay claims, and we do pay claims already, yeah, of course, but we could likewise engage on replacement versus repair. Yeah? Simple things like that, where it makes sense. In the underwriting space, it's not only about underwriting, it is increasingly, in particular for us with our big commercial book and our big risk engineering services, it is about using risk engineering capability for service and advice, for prevention before you actually have to pay. So I think like these parts of the business that are integral to actually writing the business and doing good underwriting, I think can be used and reused for additional good benefit in the decarbonisation area, because we have these capabilities. The beginning of the process for prevention and risk engineering, and at the end of the process with how do we progress claims, not only that we do it.
In terms of, first of all, I really like the statement about start somewhere, because it's a little bit of, if you can't run, walk; if you can't walk, crawl, start somewhere, and making it very, very public. In terms of where you are at the moment, how fit do you feel sort of Zurich are in terms of, are you firing on all cylinders, or what are the thorniest issues you're dealing with, today in that, decarbonisation journey? Is it interaction with your own stakeholders internally, because you're going to have to turn off some clients? Is it the challenge with the clients? Or is it just, there's this waterfall of regulation, I don't need that. So just interested to hear what's the hardest bit about it? Okay, what's the distraction from your purpose?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think kind of, again, looking back a long time, similar to Nina, I think actually there is no quick wins. What appears quick wins today kind of were hard 10, 20 years ago. But what is at the moment? I mean, I think there are three categories. I think there is one which I would describe as the objectively hard stuff. The things that we want to do that take these 1,000 or 10,000 steps to actually agree to do something that are just objectively hard. Something like, distributed truth for all of us, updating our databases to actually get better in objectively reporting on our progress. I mean, simple things like, when you have written motor policies for 100 years, of course you didn't think 40 years ago that you need to have this one box which needs to be clicked, whether it's an electric vehicle or not. Upgrading stuff like this. I mean, this is what I mean with objectively hard. Yeah. That I'm not worried about these things. They will happen. They will just happen. It's a shed load of work, but they will happen. Yeah? The really two thorny things for me are, number one, what I would call change that involves emotions on a very human basis. Yeah, because I think this is where we have to take our customers and our people with us, and we want to take them with us by properly taking them with us and not making them comply with something where their heart is not in, and that means personal reflection for all of us. And again, to give you a very, very simple example, travel, business travel. We put out in September that we will reduce our air travel, not all travel, air travel next year by 70% compared with 2019. Now that's a number. Yeah? Objectively, actually, you can say, well, we've just been through 2 years of pandemic. Where's the issue? Yeah? On a different level, we are human beings. On a different level, we crave human relationships. Two of our panel, actually, if I understand correctly, are at the moment physically in Glasgow. We had to get there somewhere, and I guess it wasn't by bicycle. So we are human beings. We crave human connections. There might be some people, I don't know, for whom business travel is also connected with status, with career, with other things. You have emotional stuff to work out, to take people with us. And for me, this is a bit more of, and by the way, I could give similar tens of examples on the customer side. So taking people with us, truly with us, I think is thorny and will take time. You know?
And I take that as a sort of segue, even if it's a clumsy segue, to go back to Nina, because I bring in the customers. And by the way, in terms of meeting people, my Myers-Briggs is I'm an ESTJ. You know, lockdown has been terrible for me, guys, you know, as an extrovert. Nina, in terms of that sort of journey and bringing the clients with you, so as a corporate solutions business, I can only imagine you're dealing with some of those, shall we say, those bigger organizations with who are confronting the change in society in a very, very real way. So how real is that conversation of, you know, engagement, and how do we know it's a real conversation going on? So like, if I say to you, Swiss Re, you know, you're telling me you're engaging or you're excluding, do you carry statistics or information, or how can we even know what you're doing, you know, Nina? Because I'm using the version here of disclose and show me. So so Nina, so how can we understand, you know, how have Swiss Re been engaging with their customers? You know, how we're underwriting decisions been, you know, redirecting between we're going to cancel or we're going to continue?
One of the most important things I have learned is communication. And communication means, you know, start to talk about topics early on, start to prepare the ground for corporates to understand where are you coming from, where are you going, and why. And I think it really has changed tremendously. When we put out the thermal coal policy in 2018, there might have been more reactions in the sense of, we don't understand why you're doing that. And if I compare that to the discussions we have today, where energy companies are actively approaching us to have a discussion, you know, around net zero, and how they can get there, how we can support them on this transition, that's a huge shift I see by and large. Obviously, you have always exemptions and maybe companies that see it a bit different. But by and large, I think there is a tremendous change. The one thing that I hear most often still these days is really that it is important to have reliability. And for them, for corporates also to kind of understand what's coming next, to also include it into their considerations. And that's what I hear most often and everywhere, how important it is for the insurance industry to explain it. And I think if we're very honest, I'm not sure how good of a job we've done in terms of communication as an industry. So that's a part one. Don't forget also the brokers and what role the brokers play into that. And I guess this is one of the parts that I would really want to highlight. I guess you then also have the areas where, if I'm very honest, which there are a lot of challenges and struggles. We have a lot of conversations around transition risk, but they tend to be high level from both sides still at this point in time. And then you really need to start engage to find solutions and be able to make specific steps and find solutions how you can support somebody with a new technology, for instance. We need to learn about these new technologies. We don't have all the expertise in-house. And I guess then find the right partners to engage on very specific and concrete cases where you say, look, that's where we want to explore. Start smaller and then build your expertise, but know about the partnership and who you select to engage with.
Again,
James, maybe just to quit, because I think what Nina really triggered something me, which I actually meant to tell as well as another thorny issue, and that is communication is one thing. This is what we can influence. Perception is another thing, and we know on a day-by-day basis how when people hear the word sustainability or decarbonization, what wide range of perceptions that triggers, both in our customers as well as in the wider public environment. And being extremely good in communication to also manage this perception risk, which I think we haven't even seen the start of yet.
No, I'm with you on that, and I'm appreciate that. And there's a big trust equation in all of this, as in, you know, are we trusted? Are we not? Are we trusted to follow through? And again, I think we even saw some of the responses to the sort of the GFANs on 130 trillion. it's confidence in what we say and clarity. Ben, I'm going to bring this in terms of, from a trust perspective, maybe, I want to sort of bring it to the, your role as, bringing British industry together in terms of, the commitments they're making. So again, as a linear organization, Zurich or Swiss can march its organization, although it's working with its customers and clients and stakeholders. But Ben, you're working together with the industry in the UK, which is quite a disparate group. Can you maybe sort of share some insights in terms of, was it dragging, kicking and screaming to get to the commitments that the industry made in July? So maybe start with the commitments made, but then talk a little bit about the journey and shall we say, any observations as to how unequally that's falling as a conversation among the participants.
Thanks, James. That's a really, really good question. I think on your sort of opening point about how do you get a sort of sectoral alignment across a very diverse sector, I think, the starting point is just making sure that there's a sort of shared understanding across different companies, across the market about the imperative to act. And, in our membership, it doesn't matter whether you're an insurance company or a pensions company, the moral and the business case, I think, is increasingly clear, as both Nina and Katja have talked about themselves. So, I think, talking to our CEOs, they absolutely understand that climate change represents an existential threat, not just to the planet, but to the industry itself. A business as usual approach to climate will destroy the insurance business model. And obviously that's because it's not that insurers won't be able to price the risk, but there'll simply be too much risk in the system for the average person to afford much of what we sell. And that's obviously not a good business position for our sector. And I think the same applies in long-term savings. There's the same urgency. If you're a pensions company, a 21-year-old joining an auto-enrollment pension today will be contributing way beyond 2050. So we need to take action now to scale up the alternatives to carbon-intensive activities and investments. So, during the 30, 40-year lifespan of these investments, that they're not exposed to sort of fundamental weakening of asset classes. So I think it's sort of the starting point in getting alignment is all about sort of a shared understanding of the kind of the business case as well as the moral case. I think the other thing about in terms of alignment across the diverse sector is, what we've really tried to do in our roadmap is articulate the key areas across the sector where we can all make a difference, whether you're a long-term savings company or an insurer. And, again, I think Katja has talked about some of these, but 4 areas where it doesn't matter where you are in the market. There's four things that you can really think about. Firstly, joining the Race to Zero campaign, which is sort of 50% cut in emissions by 2030 and net zero by 2050, underpinned by science-based targets, and having published transition plans. All of our companies have got a role as sort of major institutional investments in unlocking the capital. All of them have got a big role they can play in terms of operations and supply chains. There are companies, if you're a big motor and home insurer, you can be, up to 90% of your scope 3 emissions can be in your supply chain. So by extending that stewardship into suppliers, you can make a massive change. And again, I think Katja talked really well about how we support our customers and increase their appetite to make sustainable choices at the point of insurance claim. And I think her points about repair and a more circular economy are ones that we've really tried to put into our roadmap. So I think it is, as I say, about articulating where across the market everyone can make a difference. And to your sort of final point about kind of, I guess, is a sort of leaders and laggards point, there's probably 2 things I'd say. I think in terms of those who've still got further to go on the journey, what our roadmap aims to do is sort of help navigate people through that thicket of acronyms. Clearly firms like Swiss Re and Zurich have been at this a long time and are sort of genuine world leaders. But for those who are sort of coming to this a bit new, might have less of that kind of history. What we're trying to do is, as I say, help kind of navigate and provide a sort of simple best practice of here are the sort of 4 or 5 things that you really need to look at. I think it's also worth saying though about kind of leaders too, our membership in terms of some of the sort of major insurers, as I say, 2 of which are on the call here, are genuinely sort of leading across the sort of financial services sector. But actually there are also leading companies who want to do a lot more. So I think the other thing that we need to be able to do as a membership body is what are the kind of barriers to sort of unlock further progress. You know, certainly there's something around sort of standards. There's been so much talk about this sort of confusing and constantly opaque changing worlds of standards and measurements. So, you know, there's that clarity that investments, you know, there's not greenwashing there, and kind of whether you're an investor or you're a customer, you'll absolutely understand. And I think also in the UK, there's a big issue around prudential regulation. And we've done quite a lot of research about how changes to the prudential regulatory regime could make a big difference. One of our CEOs was talking this morning about how it's easier to invest in a coal mine than it is in a wind farm. And that clearly can't be a sensible place if we want to unlock the 130 trillions. Yeah, and I'm going to, you know, I don't want to get you run very, very quickly, but there's definitely this tension around, you know, first of all, I absolutely get the importance of leadership and fast followers using those rules. But it is that question, isn't it, about, you know, the regulator and the need for regulation to sort of to roll up the laggards and set a drum, because I do think there probably does need to be a pressure to act, you know. So I think there's tension in the system, and there is something about trust. We're going to come back to trust again. If there's a fear over greenwashing, well, how was that reputation gained? So I do see there's a sort of there's a lot to be gone through in terms of earning trust, retaining trust. And I think that's where tools like quality disclosure come in. But hopefully it doesn't get in the way of the wish to act, which is exactly what I've heard in this, which is the need to act and the want to act. And that's my, you know, intro, you know, Bronwyn, how are we doing as an industry? So from a ClimateWise perspective, you've been there, you've been painting pictures for us, you've been throwing bread on water for us to come and get. How are we doing? Are we making real progress now?
I think that there is definitely strong progress. What I would say though is that we've talked a bit about the diversity of the market. So you can see, I think Swiss Re and Zurich here are definitely at the forefront. They're really pushing that frontier of what's possible and engaging broadly. But what I'd really like to see now is more collaboration across both the industry to share skills and then also more broadly to how can the value chain of insurance engage with each other more strongly and really move how the full system operates. Because if one of sort of, you've got a client asking for a longer policy at one end, but you're coming up against a reinsurance treaty at the other end, or if you're looking to do sustainable claims and there's not enough information about the building products and the like. So there needs to be a much more sort of joined up collaborative approach across the insurance value chain to really be able to move this now at pace and scale. And not just be relying on sort of leaders to be able to sort of push a wedge. We need to kind of bring a broader piece behind this. I'm going to talk to briefly mention a couple of reports then to also people can follow up on what we're doing.
That value chain is important as well, because I think we recognise we need to go beyond private sector capacity as well. So it's not just playing well within the private sector; it's the public sector, private sector together to solve a lot of these insurance solutions. So again, that shows that the ecosystem becomes even richer to resolve the issues. Anyway, back to you. I distracted you there.
That's okay, because what I'm drawing on particularly is we had a report out earlier in the year on climate product innovation, and it really talked about how then insurers need to be engaging, as you mentioned, with the government about how do you work on those blended finance approaches, where can you bring public and private finance together so that you've got a much better risk transfer capital and able to get more happening for more people, and working on the protection gap then as well, so making sure that everyone's more fully covered. We're also particularly, we're looking for things like bringing in sort of more of the engineering skills. So there is a lot of knowledge within the value chain that I think insurance could also use to help price better, especially when you're dealing with new technologies and you're trying to support startups or other businesses. There isn't that bank of claims data to rely on. What other kind of skill sets do we need to bring into insurance so that you can build up the capacity and the capability to provide new and innovative support?
Brilliant. And again, I think we're probably going to be, I see Alex is presenting herself. She warned us she was going to present herself when I was supposed to go, but can we just talk as well about, it's not just climate, Bronwyn, as in, I think we're increasingly starting to see that the biosphere is much richer and, much more valuable to us. So do you want to just talk in terms of how we're broadening the definition of what needs to be in scope for us to ensure our future?
Certainly. So another piece that we published yesterday was around risk sharing in the climate emergency, and that was very much looking at how do you deal with this in the round as well. and bringing in those broader pictures of resilience and talking to that the COP, as you here at COP, you're seeing a strong theme of net zero, but also really how does that fit within the round of resilience, and how do you provide for biodiversity and nature whilst also covering off on carbon emissions, so that you're not accidentally creating future issues that are connected with biodiversity or nature loss. How can we try and tackle this as a holistic approach and avoid hindrances?
Brilliant. I'm going to sort of take it, Alexander. We're not going to be able to get to our last couple of questions in terms of what did we hear from COP.
Sorry.
Do I get 1 minute to finish out?
I'm sorry, you can quick wrap up. We've run out of time, I'm afraid.
First of all, I wanted to thank the panelists, and the two things that I took out, from this is it doesn't really matter where you are. It is kind of about starting, and your fitness will build over time. I think there's also an open hand here that says we have leaders in the field. We need the fast followers, so it's clear action to follow. And then thirdly is I think everybody has an awful lot of homework coming back from COP, because I think there's no shortage of reports on themes, individuals or processes arising this week. So I think everybody has their weekend reading put out for them for the ensuing weeks. But I think I would say I'm very, very hopeful, that we as an industry can take our part in supporting the transition, because the transition will not happen without insurance.
Thanks so much, James. Really interesting session. Thank you all for your thoughts and perspectives there. Appreciate the sharing. Coming up next, we've got a presentation from Desiree Matreau, CEO of OCC, all around transformation of an established insurance niche player and what female leadership has to do with it. Looking forward to that one.